And welcome everybody to another episode of Love Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again for the, 200th episode of this podcast from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
And how appropriate for episode 200 that we had 4 MMA shows in 2 days last weekend.
Yeah, an epic amount of shows. But before we start that, Stevie, 200 episodes. That's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, you and I have got a pretty good track record going now. We've had a lot of very interesting and famous guests from the world of mixed martial arts. We've covered all the big events and breaking news in the last 3+ years, so I'd say we got something good going on here.
Absolutely. Episode 1, the first few episodes of Donald Hoover to where we are now, I mean, that seems like a lifetime ago.
It does, but hey, it just means that we've been putting in work.
Yeah, absolutely, and God, I can only imagine the record of fighters we've had on the show for win-loss records. I mean, we've had some pretty epic guests. One of them that really stands out in my head, off the top of my head here, that really stands out, has to be Chris Lytle.
Oh yeah, Lights Out Chris Lytle was a big one, but I always flash back to Ian McCall. Uncle Creepy is still one of my favorite interviews that we've done.
That's a great one too, and he's in the conversation yet again for a future title shot, but, it's an interesting situation that he's in. That division, it's not as bad as, others in the world of UFC, but...
Well, he's kind of the Uriah Faber of the flyweight division. Like, he'll beat everybody else that's underneath him.
And if DJ goes up in weight, then you never know.
Yeah, if DJ goes up in weight, he could be the next guy.
Absolutely, but we should talk about the fights that happened last week, and we should start in Sweden since that was the first show that aired on Saturday and the doubleheader that they had, and quite the show. Actually, it's funny, I do want to give a shout out to Live 885 having me on their show, The Morning Startup.
But you were there to talk about the Halifax card, not Stockholm.
But I did touch on the main event. I did watch out for Rick's Story in the main event of this card. And I got a text from a friend of mine afterwards, and he goes, "You do know you picked against Gunnar Nelson, right?" And I go, yeah, wait till Saturday, you'll see what happens. And man, did I come out like the genius of the show. I mean, Rick's Story winning, basically, I know it was a split decision. I get that.
48-47, 49-46, 50-44, and the 48-47 was Gunnar Nelson.
Come on.
Those scores are all over the fucking map.
I mean, we've talked about judging controversy over and over on the show, but how does one judge go 50-44 and one go 48-47? Were they watching a different fight?
They were. They had to have been, because I'll be perfectly honest here, and I picked Gunnar Nelson to win this fight, but I thought the only round where it was even close was the 4th round. I thought Rick Story won almost every round of that fight.
She had a 49-46, and I felt weird with saying that.
Or wait, no, I correct myself. I don't mean the 4th round was the close one. I mean the 4th round was the 10-8 round.
Yeah.
Which round was... maybe it was the 2nd round I'm thinking of that was the close round.
So many fights in the past weekend, you're starting to mush together in your head.
Swimming, yeah. There's a lot of fights to go back and think about. But yeah, the 4th round was the one where Story nearly finished him.
And when they announced the judges' scorecard and they said 48-47 Nelson, Story's look on his face was pure shock. Like, seriously?
That must have been the hometown judge.
But there was one shot, I forget what round it was in, probably the 4th, when Story caught him with a left hook, and Nelson's neck went back, and it was like, it was very close to being over, but I've never seen Nelson get tagged like that before.
Yeah, and nobody had. That's why everybody, and I mean literally everybody other than you, had picked Gunnar Nelson. Wrestling Observer, it was like 9-1, and I think the one person who picked Rick Story was Oliver Kopp.
I'm just going to pat myself on the shoulder for that one.
Yeah, you made a good pick. What can I say?
Semi-main event, Max Holloway against Akira Corisani. Didn't last long, 3 minutes and 11 seconds. And in the post-fight, Max Holloway said that he had one thought going through his head, and that was, when is the referee going to stop this fight?
That's probably an accurate statement to make.
Like, was the referee on the opposite end of the cage, or was he just not paying attention? It's one of those things where it's like, please, for the love of God, stop this fight.
But you know what? It doesn't matter because all that's really important here is that Max Blessed Holloway got that big win he needs to propel him upward to the upper ranks. It's time people stop doubting the kid just because he's so young. I mean, people used to doubt Rory McDonald because he was so young, and look where he is now. I think Max Blessed Holloway is another one of those emerging fighters where he is that good that young.
True. I mean, definitely a good win here, but I mean, Coruscant isn't exactly a top tier, champion level fighter, but it's a good stepping stone, I guess you could say, for Holloway.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's a co-main event. It's a guy that's a name people recognize, and it's an impressive finish. This is the kind of, if you're not already paying attention to Max Holloway, this is your wake up notice.
Well, he did make the top 15. In fact, he is number 15 now in the featherweight division. Just looking ahead, the next three fighters ahead of him on that list: Clay Guida, Darren Ekins, and Charles Oliveira.
I would pair him up with Clay Guida because those two would have an exciting, entertaining, energetic fight.
That's definitely youth versus experience, and the way Guida fights, that would be a very entertaining fight for sure.
And it would be speed against speed too. And I think that might be one of those cases where Holloway might be just a little bit quicker, but it'd be close. It'd be real close.
In the light heavyweight division, Jan Blachowicz beat Iri Latifi. Man, this was a short fight too, just under 2 minutes at a minute 58 with body kicking punches.
Yeah, and Latifi, I don't know if he even knew what was going on because he was, this was not a good night for the stars of the territory, so to speak. The Swedish stars, the European stars, they came in there thinking they were going to get a showcase, and a lot of them got knocked out of there in a hurry.
Well, yeah, I love how you use the wrestling analogy for that one in the territory, but it's accurate. Um, sometimes when you go into a market and you flood the card with hometown talent, sometimes you're going to have a lot of Canadians winning, and sometimes you're going to have a lot of Swedish fighters losing. I mean, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in
Going
Brazil
back
too.
just for a second
They've
in the
stacked up
welterweight,
Brazil
Rick
cards.
Story goes up to 12 after being not ranked at all, and Gunnar Nelson goes down 2 spots to 14.
Which makes sense. With a big loss like that, Gunnar should drop a couple spots.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's not saying he's out of the rankings, but he's pretty darn close. But as far as this contest is concerned, Blachowicz, did he really impress you here? Like, do you think with a win in his next fight he'll crack the top 15?
I don't know. Ilir Latifi was not a top 15 guy to begin with, so it's an impressive win, but the difference between that and the Blessed Holloway fight is Holloway had already been around for a while and people kind of knew who he was, but they didn't know if he was that good or if he was just having good fights coming his way up into the, top upper fights that he could get. But I think people now realize he can fight with any of the guys in the top 15, whereas when you beat Ilir Latifi, I don't know that proves that you can beat anybody in the top 15.
But it does set him up for an entertaining next fight to crack those rankings, though.
He could get a fight that's right on the bubble of the 15. I could see it.
It's almost like you wish like they had the rankings. You have the top 15, but then you have like 2 or 3 fighters that saying keep an eye on these guys. You know what I mean? Like honorable mention.
Well, that's kind of why I was frustrated when they went from 10 to 15 to begin with, because in my mind, I already had 3 or 4 guys in every weight class when it was only 10 fighters and we were picking 10. It was like, yeah, these guys aren't good enough to be top 10, but keep an eye on them. And now that it's 15, even those guys that it was like keep an eye on, you still have to include them in the rankings, and then you have to come up with 5 more.
That's absolutely true. Kicking off the main card on Fight Pass was Mike Wilkinson beating Nicholas Backstrom. Knocked him out in 79 seconds.
Another hometown guy who took the L.
As far as the undercard is concerned, Dennis Seaver beating Charles Rosa was the one fight I had my eye on. It was a one-sided butt kicking, 30-27 across the board.
Although I believe it got either the fight of the night or the performance of the night, one of the 2 bonuses. So you'll have to remind me which.
It did get fight of the night.
Yep. So it's not like he didn't go out there and give Seaver everything he had. It's just Seaver was the better man.
Absolutely. Performance of the night went to Mike Wilkinson and Max Holloway, so they each get 50 grand. Overall, what are your thoughts on this show?
I'd say there were some fun fights if you're a hardcore fight fan, but I'd also say that given the time of day it aired and where it aired from and the fact that it was exclusive to Fight Pass, it's not going to be that important of a card in the grand scheme of things.
I will say that the main card had a lot of quick finishes, and that being said, let's move on to the show in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where the main card was flooded with decisions.
And the irony there is that a Major League Baseball playoff game ran really, really, really long on Fox Sports 1. So a lot of people didn't even see those fights that all went to decision because they had to keep bouncing around to different networks. They bounced it to Fox Sports 2. They bounced it to FX. They kept trying to find a place to air the fights because that playoff game never ended. It was the longest playoff game in Major League Baseball history.
Over 6 hours, and the scary thing is, I watched both. I had the game on the TV, and I had it on my laptop, the UFC, because I have the app, right, so you can do whatever.
Right.
What was really cool about it was the baseball game at the ninth inning, the starter for the Washington Nationals. He basically pitched a gem of a game, and in the ninth inning with one out and a runner on first, the coach stepped in and said, he's going to bring in the reliever to end the game. It's nothing saying against him, but a lot of people are questioning that decision because let the guy battle out of this. He's already pitched 100 pitches, yes, but he's got one out. He's pitched a hell of a game. Don't micromanage this. And it turns out the game basically turned into 2 games in 1 because it went to the 18th. And you're like, how do we go from being so close to being over to being the longest game in baseball history?
That's because of the second guessing, which you just said yourself.
And it's funny now, it's a moot point because the Nationals have just been eliminated as of last night.
Yep, so it's all over now, but it sure made for an interesting night if you were trying to watch fights on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get to the main card, let's start at the bottom. I'm not quoting Drake here, but...
Started from the bottom, now we here.
Alright, well, the prelims on Fight Pass... it was actually pretty sweet. Both fights didn't last, long. Pedro Munoz beat Jared Santos in 39 seconds. I mean, you blink, you missed it.
Yeah, I said when I was recapping it that the highlights of that fight could just be the whole fight.
Absolutely. And then you go to Turmanoff and Dwyer, and that lasted 1 minute and 3 seconds.
Oh, those head kicks. Did you see those head kicks, Peter?
It was the shin heard round the world. It was... and they had that super slow-mo replay. I'm like, oh, that's not good.
How did Tumanov not get a knockout bonus for that, or a performance bonus, or whatever the hell we're calling it now?
I'm sure he got something under the table for that. I mean, when you have so many fights on a card, and maybe that fight got forgotten about when it came to awarding the bonus money, but I'm sure someone slipped him an extra something.
Considering he'll be on every highlight reel and every video package of greatest UFC head kick knockouts, yeah, he deserves something.
As far as the prelims on Fox Sports 2, and I'm using the quotation marks because we all know how far the baseball game went. The one fight, actually there's 2 fights on here I want to talk about, and that's Paul Felder beating Jason Sago via split decision. I'm not sure the right guy won here, but that's neither here nor there. It's one of those things where it comes to the judges. I'm not saying because it's a homer pick. It's more just it was a very close fight.
Yeah, it was super close. I actually didn't have a problem with it going either way.
Oh, shoot. I almost forgot. Olivier Aubin-Mercier beating Jake Lindsay with the really sick Americana. I mean, that was a work of art there, and he actually got a performance bonus because of it. What are your thoughts of this fight?
He's another one of those guys where I talk about being as good as they are for as young as they are, and Aubin Mercier, I thought this when I saw him on Tough Nations, and I heard about him being a tri-star prospect, and I saw how good he was on that show. I was like, this kid doesn't even know how good he is yet. In a couple of years, he's going to be beating the bricks off everybody.
And the main event on Fox Sports 2, the kick to wrap up the prelims, Darren Cruikshank beating Anthony Njokuani. Unanimous decision, and Njokuani, man, what do you do with him now?
I've been saying this for a while. I think Njokuani is a little past his prime. I think he's become a gatekeeper fighter at this point. I don't see much of a future for him at UFC, whereas Cruikshank is a guy that's been on the rise for a while, knocked out Eric Koch. I think he's a guy that you can bank on for the future, whereas Njokuani is not.
Well, if you look at his record now, he's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's lost his last 2, and his last victory was against Roger Bowling when he knocked him out back in 2013 on the 420 show, Henderson versus Melendez.
I find it interesting you use the Brazilian pronunciation for the one guy that's not Brazilian.
I just get so used to seeing it. I'm saying Roger now.
Yeah, no, not in this case. If it was Roger Gracie, you'd be right, but it's Roger Bowling.
Well, moving on to the main card, at this point in the card, Stevie, I have a little confession to make. When I was on the Live 88.5, and I said I could see 6, perhaps even 7 Canadian fighters out of the 9 winning their fights. I'm sitting here with my scorecard. I have 2-2 right now. So I have to run the table, have 5 for 5 on the main card to basically have my prediction come to fruition. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I got to go 5 for 5, and I was on pins and needles, so I'm thinking I don't want to be a fool here, but I was very happy to see Mitch Gagnon winning his fight with a rear naked choke in the first round.
Yeah, I'm sure that made your day.
That was, it was really good to see him win that fight. I don't know what you do with him next. I don't know who you put in front of him next, but it's one of those feel-good stories for sure.
True. Gagnon's been around for a long time now, so.
Moving on to the split decision victory of Nordin Taleb beating Li Jinliang.
Yeah, talking about being around forever. How many seasons of Ultimate Fighter did Nordin Taleb end up on or try out for? This guy's been in and out of Bellator. I mean, he's one of those guys that's just everywhere you go, you see him.
Yeah, he's been on 2 seasons of Tough, but I'm sure he's tried out for a few more before that. I don't know what you do here as well with both fighters. Last thing was a nothing fight, but I went to a split decision, and I really don't want to see these guys in a rematch.
No, I think you just move on from this. If it was controversial, I would say do it, but not every split decision is a controversy.
Just to put a nice little bow on it, both Tough Nations fighters had their first fight after winning the contract, and both Canadian fighters, won their fight via unanimous decision. Any notes on these 2 fights here, or it's basically just move on?
I'd say it's what you'd expect. You win the show, you should be good. It's what else would you want? If otherwise, what was the point of having that season?
Absolutely. Both fighters showed why they are worthy of the contract in the UFC. Both fighters here we'll see more of them down the road. It'd be funny to see what happens when they don't fight in their home country. I mean, maybe they have that little extra motivation, but I think we're going to see both these guys for quite a few fights. I really like both these guys here, and it's just. I would have, how do I say this? It's very telling that they won their fights. I mean, if they were beaten here, it'd be considered an upset, but I'm glad to see both the guys, toughed it out.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, but, both guys unanimous decisions here, and I'm happy for them.
Indeed.
Semi-main event was Rafael Assunção beating Brian Caraway, another unanimous decision, and I'm sure Ronda Rousey's very happy with this fight.
Of course.
Main event time, and to steal a line from one of your favorite rappers, Stevie, Rory McDonald basically said, "Allow me to reintroduce myself."
Yeah, this is when I said before, you want to go out there and showcase your skill to the world and remind everybody why you're that good and why you deserve to be in consideration for things. This was the fight where Rory McDonald didn't just go out there and fight a technical fight. He didn't just go out there and beat an opponent decisively. He went out there and put an exclamation point on it.
Yeah, somebody asked me, what are your thoughts on Rory McDonald? I said, well, he can be intense at times, and it showed here. He had that look on his face like he's going to go through Tarek Safadine, and
boy, did he ever.
It's hard to put into words the extent. I mean, it was one of those things where, he had a game plan, he executed it, he won. Simple as that. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it only went to the third round, a minute 28, but this was McDonald's fight. He wanted to prove that he wants that next title shot. And in the post-fight interview, he basically pulled a GSP here.
Yeah, he said, you gotta give me the title shot. I mean, what else do I have to do to prove that I deserve it? In more or less words, that's what he said.
Yeah, and basically it brought back memories of GSP on his hands and knees begging for a title shot.
I'm perfectly fine with it after this fight, because Tarek Safadine was a former champion in Strikeforce, and he's definitely a worthwhile fighter, but McDonald just looked like he was on a whole other level, and he looked the same way against Tyron Woodley, but he didn't get a finish. In this case, he did get a finish. I think he's proved it. I think this is the time where you say the winner of Lawler and Hendricks has to face McDonald. I don't think you have a choice now.
No, you don't. The only difference here, the only thing I would say is I would be very surprised if they don't fly McDonald in for that fight so they show him in the crowd.
Yeah, he should be sitting front row right next to Dana White. They should be like buddy-buddy, shoulder to shoulder.
I would even, as a joke, I'd take out a notepad and just start scribbling notes.
Okay.
Be like he's scouting his next fight and just have him writing down stuff.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like that well, if he's gonna do that, why don't he just get up there and sit at one of the cage side, monitors, and then actually be looking up at the fight from a monitor?
Fair enough, but it'd just be for comedic value to see him. They cut to McDonald during breaking one of the rounds. He's scribbling notes in a notepad or something.
Nah, see, actually, now the more that I think about it, I wouldn't even do that because he'll have tapes of the fight. His camp will go over it. There's no reason to do that. Just show him having a good time, kicking back with Dana White, having a beer, and then afterwards, when the fight's over and he gets to step in the cage and call out whoever won, that's when it can get serious.
Yeah, I see your point. I'm just trying to be, funny about it, but Rory McDonald, definitely, he's next in line for that title shot, and, be very interesting to see what happens in the Hendricks-Lawler rematch.
You know what would be really funny, and you're talking about setting things up and making things happen? Imagine if it plays out that he gets the winner of Lawler and Hendricks, wins the title himself, and GSP comes back. Just imagine it. Just picture that in your head.
Oh.
That's a lot of dominoes that would have to fall for that to fall into place, but that could be epic.
Alright, so let's move on to the one-night tournament from Battlegrounds MMA. You covered this show. I believe there was a YouTube video which I watched that you had talking about it. And, the floor is yours. Overall thoughts on this show?
I'd say the two takeaways I have from this is that Juan Carnero deserved to win the tournament. He proved he was the superior fighter going through all those fights in one night, and being the well-rounded fighter that he is in general, he looks like a guy who could succeed in any organization. World Series of Fighting, Bellator, Strikeforce. He's a top prospect in the sport. Whereas the other takeaway I have from this is Cody McKenzie. What the fuck happened to you?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not saying he's fallen off, but man, he donated blood to cut weight. I mean, I've never heard of that.
He came in chunky.
Yeah, and it's up 2 weight classes now?
Yeah, that's not good.
Well, I mean, maybe he's fighting more at his natural weight.
Yeah, but it didn't help him win.
No, it did not help him win, and maybe he has to go back to a lighter weight class, but
Well, and you know, he used to catch everybody in that guillotine choke that we called the Mackenzie team, and now he's not catching anybody.
No, no, absolutely not.
It's
What
it's
with,
it's almost like the guy lost his desire to be a fighter, which makes me wonder why is he even taking this fight for Battlegrounds MMA if your heart's not in it anymore and you're barely making weight for 2 weight classes up from where you used to fight and you're just getting tooled out there. What are you even doing fighting anymore? It's sometimes guys just need to if their heart's not in it, they just need to leave before they get hurt.
okay, pause for a sec.
Yeah.
It's starting coming down like just like a hurricane here. Hold on one sec. I gotta make sure the windows. It was really windy for like 5 minutes, and then the rain just came down like you wouldn't believe.
I understand. Hey,
That
that's
just
what happens when we're taping glove up or shut up. Sometimes breaking news is a breaking storm.
yeah, right. Just gotta make sure the windows are closed because that's fucking powerful.
And you know what? I guess there's a storm too over the commentary because people were trying to figure out whether JR and Chael Sonnen were a good team or not.
Yeah, okay. Hold on. Cat's looking up. What the fuck, man?
Yeah, everybody's like, what the fuck with that commentary because, you know, everybody's wondering is Jim Ross going to call it like pro wrestling or is he going to call it like MMA? And I guess the verdict is in that he did a pretty good job overall.
Yeah, no, I think that's going back to that. Okay, so what we'll do is you're gonna edit this so that we can just.
No, really, I don't need to. I've been talking this whole time, so why edit it? Let's just keep going.
All right. I don't want to have like, I'm closing the windows to my son.
Peter, it's real life. Shit happens. Just get over it and keep going on because I've already been talking about Battlegrounds this whole time.
All right.
So, my point being that Chael Sonnen was what everybody expected Chael Sonnen to be. He was the color guy, and Jim Ross did the play-by-play, and it was, again, every report says he got better as the show went on. So, I think JR would be good if he does another show.
Yeah, I think for first time out, he did pretty good, and it's going to be very telling to see if these two guys get an opportunity again to work together. And
I just think it's funny that they picked the one night and the one weekend to run a pay-per-view and do an 8-man tournament where they were going against 2 UFC shows and head-to-head with a Bellator show. So they kind of got tooled in that respect because I hear the live audience was not that big, and I don't know how many people actually bought the pay-per-view. I was keeping track of the results on the comment thread for my live Bellator recap for MMA Mania. That's how I knew what was going on with Battlegrounds because people were talking about it in the comments section of my Bellator recap.
Yeah, they didn't pick a great day. I mean, it wasn't a Friday night, so the only real competition they had was Bellator, but people also had the 2 shows on Saturday, so.
And if you got a pay-per-view that you gotta buy, or you got Bellator for free on Spike, your fans are gonna tune to the one they don't have to pay for. There you go.
Now, one last thing about this show, your thoughts on JT Money losing in the first round.
Again, it's kind of one of those situations where I ask myself, does this guy really have his heart in it? He's gone from UFC where he got into trouble to World Series of Fighting where he had, whatever kind of career you want to say he had there. And now in Battlegrounds MMA, it's like, what do you do with the guy at this point?
Exactly. It's one of those things where, I'm not saying he's old, but, I mean, take away his Ultimate Fighter experience. Yes, he didn't fight in the finale. Yes, he lost because of an incident that happened in a parking lot, but, he still has the skill set there. However, I don't think he's being, I'm not saying smart with his fights, it's not the right way, but it's more just he's not utilizing his skills to the best of their potential.
I think at this point he needs to reinvent himself. He needs to go to the Access TV level. He needs to be on Resurrection Fighting Alliance or Maximum Fighting Championships or Legacy Fighting. He needs to be on cards like that and put together 3 or 4 wins in an impressive way and just rededicate himself to the sport.
Absolutely. Also on Friday was Bellator 127. Boy, there were a few interesting fights on here.
Emerson, what do we do here, Emerson? You talked about 200 episodes. You got to talk about that.
Yeah, no, you beat me to the punch on that one, literally.
Yeah, well, Rafael Silva did as well.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second, but I do want to touch on the prelims before we talk main event. And Sokuju, winning his fight in the second round, 404 via TKO.
Oh my God, that was a bloodbath.
Yeah, the Red Cross must have been on standby. Like, it was just gnarly.
I had people asking me about it during my live recap. They're like, why is there blood all over this cage? I'm like, guys, you weren't watching the prelims. Trust me, this is from the Sokuju fight.
And, I'm not saying little puddle here, a little puddle there. No. I mean, sometimes I'll watch a fight, a card, and I'll miss the prelims, and it'll be like little spots here or there, like, oh, somebody must have bled a little bit. But this was just Ric Flair-esque.
Yeah, read through the comments section on my recap on MMA Media, and somebody coined it Sokobos, because his elbows were just nasty as hell.
Yeah, sometimes those elbows can clip you real fast and in the right spot, and you got a gusher.
Yeah, this was a good stoppage because Malik Murad was not even going to be able to see. The blood was just covering his face, and he was, it was deep and nasty enough that you would want a doctor to stitch that up immediately.
Going on the main card here, Kendall Grove beating Christian Mpumbu. Second round, rear naked choke.
I feel like a fool. I thought Christian Mpumbu would be much stronger and much better at middleweight, and I thought Kendall Grove was kind of even though he's a former UFC veteran, Ultimate Fighter winner and everything, I kind of thought he's at the point in his career where he's a journeyman. Well, no, he proved me wrong with this fight. Wow, did he finish Mpumbu.
And it's not saying, like, he got caught and that was it, like something, crap happens sometimes. This was dominant.
Yeah, this was Kendall Grove getting the better of him pretty much everywhere the fight went, and I really did not expect that. I thought that Christian Mpumbu, with his record, he was 18-6 going into this fight, and he'd only looked bad at light heavyweight, which was too big of a weight class for him. Even though he's the former light heavyweight champion, he was taking fights that he was having to come up to 205 to fight, so I really thought at middleweight he was going to be the superior fighter. Again, boy, was I wrong.
Now, what do you do with both these fighters, though? I mean, in one case, you got Mpumbu, who, I don't want to say gatekeeper, but I don't know what you do with him. And Grove, I mean, you give him a good fight and see if he has another quality victory here.
Yeah, I think upward mobility for Grove, and I think for Mpumbu, you probably cut him a little slack because it's his first time fighting at middleweight, so maybe the second time he'll do better.
Rafael Silva beating Rob Emerson, unanimous decision.
Unfortunately, the second straight fight where Silva came in over the bantamweight limit.
Which, I don't understand that. Really, like, okay, you miss it once. If that's the first time you've ever missed weight, okay. I mean, it's not good, but it's excusable, I guess you could say. But if you miss it a second time with the same promotion...
The only thing that saves him here is that he got a win, because he lost to Joe Warren the last time, and that's how Joe Warren became the interim champion. But if he had lost 2 in a row missing weight, they probably would have cut him.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernando Gonzalez beating Carl Parisian in the first round. This did not take long at all.
No. The Menifee Maniac gets it done in 103 seconds, and this is the second big upset for him because he also beat Psycho Carl Amasu, coincidentally, in Temecula. So don't put this guy on a card in Temecula and put him against somebody you think is a star, because he's going to get the upset every time.
Absolutely. Main event time, Daniel Strauss beating Justin Wilcox.
Woo! Beat the brakes off him.
I mean, 50 seconds is all it took, and if you would have said, Stevie, last week that this fight wouldn't last a minute, like, I would think you got, rocks in your head.
I predicted Strauss to win, but not that fast.
Oh.
He said it. He said it himself. Like, I'm the former champion. I'm going to be champion again. Give me anybody. I'm going to beat him.
Yeah, it's very explosive, and we'll see Daniel Strauss dominate, again down the road, probably sooner rather than later. I mean, if you win your fight in 50 seconds, you're going to be fighting once again in like a month or two.
Yeah, he's definitely next in line for the featherweight title now. If it's whether it's Patricky, if he gets the fight, or if he ends up having a number one contenders fight with Pat Curran, either way, he's coming for that title.
I find it funny if you're Pat Curran, it's like, all right, we got an opponent for you. Oh yeah, who are you fighting? Oh, the guy who just won by 50 seconds. What?
The guy you've already fought twice.
Yeah. Him again? Jesus.
But you know what? I'm actually kind of in favor of that because they're 1-1 against each other now. I think you do need a rubber match, and if you're going to make that a number one contenders match, I like that even more.
Yep, absolutely. Let's stay with Bellator because they got a show this Friday, and it's headlined by Eduardo Dantas against Joe Warren for the unification for the bantamweight title.
Yep, and they were originally supposed to have that fight at Bellator 118, but Dantas was injured at the time, so that's how we got the Joe Warren-Rafael Silva fight.
Mm-hmm. It's Joe Warren said champions don't run.
Okay, what's his point? What are you saying?
I don't know. I heard that this week, and I was trying to figure out why he said it, but I think Warren's just trying to drum up some trash talk before the fight. Maybe maybe he's thinking Dantas was ducking him. That's why the fight took so long. I don't know.
Okay, well, he can say whatever he wants, but here's the thing you need to know, and I'm saying this not just for you, but for all of our listeners out there of Glove Up or Shut Up. Dantas has never lost in Bellator. Now, we know that he lost to Tyson Nam. That's one of our former guests right here on this show. But in Bellator, he's unbeaten. And that includes when he won the bantamweight title from Zach Funsize Makovsky. So, this guy is a beast in the Bellator cage. And Joe Warren, he was the former featherweight champion, and he's gone on a run since he came down to bantamweight, but I'm still thinking that Eduardo Dantas is the superior fighter at bantamweight, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the baddest man on the planet, as he likes to call himself. And he can say champions don't run all he wants to, but neither does Eduardo Dantas, and nobody has beaten Dantas in Bellator yet.
But he is beatable.
He is beatable, but he hasn't been beaten in Bellator. And when he did get beat, it's the way he came back from getting beat. He knocked out Marcos Galvao, and then he choked out Anthony Leone. In 2 title defenses, 2 finishes. So he came back from losing that fight in Brazil, that non-title fight in Brazil, and responded the way a champion would respond.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see Warren win this fight, but, it's a tough hill to climb, but this is why you fight the fights.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that really hurts him here is that Dantas is a finisher and Joe Warren is not. Joe Warren only finishes fights 36% of the time. Dantas finishes his wins 62% of the time. So as I said in my preview for MMAmania.com, do the math.
Exactly. Nashawn Burrell fights Michael Page, Derek Campos, and Alexander Stanovitsky.
No, you're actually wrong about that. But let's talk about Michael Page and Nashawn Burrell first, because Michael Venom Page, MVP, is a guy they've tagged the star label onto. They want him to be the big guy in the welterweight division for them. So it's possible he gets a title shot against Douglas Lima if he has an impressive win. And so far, he's had nothing but impressive wins. He's a kickboxer that comes from a family of kickboxing fighters, and he's got a lot of power and explosiveness. And Nashawn Burrell, good record overall. He actually has 6 knockout finishes. None recently, though. None in Strikeforce UFC recent history that he's had those 2 promotions. And I'm not saying that Nashawn Burrell is a tomato can, because he's far from it. But they picked a fight I think that they think that Michael Page can win.
right, so, okay, how do you say this name? Because you said I butchered it.
Well, it's not that you got the name wrong, it's that you got the fight wrong. Tiger Sardovisky is fighting Dakota Cochran.
Oh, I have the outdated list on my sheet then.
Yeah, no, go to Bellator.com and you will see that is the fight. In fact, they sent me the weigh-in list of fighters that are going to weigh in on Thursday and confirmed it. Cochran is his opponent, and it's going to be fought at a catch weight of 160 pounds.
Catchweight fight.
Yep. Well, Dakota usually fights a weight class up from lightweight, so yeah, a catch weight is reasonable under these circumstances.
Okay, who you got in that fight?
I got Tiger Sardovisky by submission.
All right. Now, what about Bubba McDaniel and Emiliano Sordi?
Yep, another former guest of our show, so hey, we're just going over the history here on Glove Up or Shut Up, aren't we? It's that kind of day for episode 200. I've got McDaniel winning this fight by submission.
Yeah, he's a very exciting fighter, and I see him winning this fight for sure.
Yeah, and the edge here is because Bubba McDaniel finishes 75% of his wins by submission, and Sordi has only lost 4 times, but 50% of those losses were via submission. So, again, this is another case of do the math. If McDaniel avoids Sordi's power, gets it to the ground, Sordi is vulnerable to being caught.
All right, well, let's move on to World Series of Fighting. They got a show in Edmonton, Alberta, and the main event is quite interesting as Ryan Ford fights former UFC fighter Jake Shields.
Yeah, it should be a barn burner of a fight.
And semi-main event is for the heavyweight title. It's Derek Mimmin against Samino Rama.
Mm-hmm.
So heavyweight tilt, they're going to crown the heavyweight champion, which is pretty cool. Also on the card is Jared Hammond against Luke Harris and Chris Hordecki against Luis Hurdy.
Hordesky.
Wow. Screw that.
Yeah, it's a stacked card top to bottom. They've even got some interesting fights on the prelims. Michael Hill and Marcus Hicks at a catchweight of 175. Tim Hague and Craig Hudson at heavyweight. It's a promising card.
I can't remember when Tim Hague got cut though.
What do you mean got cut?
Well, Tim Hague, former UFC fighter.
No, he's been with World Series of Fighting for a little while now.
Oh, I know, but I can't remember when he. I'm trying to remember when he left UFC to go elsewhere. Like sometimes you see a fighter on a World Series of Fighting or a Bellator card, and like, when did they get cut? When did that happen? Like,
I would say it was probably 2011 when he lost to Matt Mitrione in 2 minutes 59 seconds.
Oh right, yeah, there it is. Okay. Sometimes they release fighters and it just goes very under the radar. Like sometimes you'll see a release via Twitter.
Yeah, but like I said, I've been thinking of him as a World Series of Fighting guy for a while now because he was on the first Canada card and the second Canada card. He beat Jordan Mean's father, Lee Mean, in the first one, and he beat Matt Baker in the second one.
Well, he's definitely an entertaining fighter, and I think a win here would definitely, help him in World Series of Fighting. Maybe even get him back on UFC's radar.
Maybe.
All right, so let's talk some news. And apparently, Max Holloway was feeling bad while pummeling Akira Kurosane.
Okay.
So basically, like I said before, his thought was, why isn't the referee stopping this fight? Would you rather have a fight stopped too early or too late?
I always favor the early side of stoppage. You and I have had that discussion several times already, and I always say that we're better off if a fighter gets stopped early before he gets hurt than stopped late when really bad things happen to you.
Well, November 15th is a day that, if you love MMA, circle the date on your calendar. You've got World Series of Fighting 15 on top of what just was announced. Also on November 15th, UFC 180 as well as Bellator 131. Why is this day having so many fights?
I've been asking myself that question about MMA for a while now, is why does every promotion feel the need to all have their events at the same time, the same weekend, or God forbid, the same day?
Well, this is a big fight. I think they're throwing everything against the wall for World Series of Fighting. It's a triple main event, which is rare in mixed martial arts. Not only UFC, but mixed martial arts when you're a triple main event. You've got three championship fights: Jessica Aguilar against Kalindra Ferry, Justin Gaethje against Melvin Gillard, and Dave Branch against Yushin Okami.
Yeah, well, like you said, they're stacking it up, and this will be the first time three major MMA promotions all have an event on the same night. So, oh boy, what are we gonna do here? I'm gonna need everybody to chip in on this one. I'm gonna need you to cover something. I'm gonna need Kevin to cover something. I'm gonna cover something. We're all gonna have to work together on this.
Yeah, something's gonna have to happen. Titan FC has a show on Halloween, which is very interesting to have a show on October 31st. Um, it's going to be headlined by WEC versus Bellator here as Miguel Torres fights Desmond Green.
Okay, well, guess it depends on what Miguel Torres we get.
You're not a big fan of his anymore.
The bloom is off the rose for me with him. When he was the champion in WEC, he looked like a beast, and since then, not so much.
Now, I do want to get your thoughts on the Kung Lee suspension. We talked about it last week. We talked about it on Facebook over the past few days because they boasted the suspension from 9 months to a year. And now it's come out that the drug test itself has come into question.
What's the question?
Well, the way they got the samples after the fight instead of before the fight, and the whole drug test has been brought into question because after a fight, your testosterone levels are going to be higher after the fight, right?
I don't know that I buy that it's a case where it would mask an HGH positive. I think if you took it before the fight, thinking it would be out of your system after the fight because your body metabolizes it, that's why you would take the test right after the fight, and that's how you would get flagged for it.
But why do they take the samples after the fight, though?
Again, for the possibility that a guy took something after weigh-ins the day before thinking it would metabolize in his system and already be gone.
It's just, I see what they're trying to do here, and it does raise question marks in the drug policy and the drug testing policies. It might expose, I'm not going to say a loophole, but
You know what, Peter? I'm going to just shut that loophole right here. I think as a fighter, you have to agree to submit blood or urine at any time, anywhere they ask. Before a fight, after a fight, 3 months away from a fight, in the middle of the night, they knock on your door and ask you for a sample. You give it to them.
yeah, you don't run away like Silva, but I'm saying, you know, I think this is the first time we're seeing someone come out and say this. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a smokescreen or not. I think there's more credence here than what some outlets are reporting about it.
All I can say is Kung Lee didn't pass the naked eye test, so it's not really surprising that he didn't pass the drug test.
The only thing that I would say, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about before we move on, technically, there's no appeal process to this. It's basically, that's it, that's all. There's no appeals.
No, he's suspended and that's it. And I don't think it matters too much to Kung Lee if he's suspended or not because he's got a burgeoning movie career. So really, in fact, it might actually do him a favor.
Now, did you hear about the Battlegrounds winner getting fined by the Oklahoma State Athletic Commission?
No, I must have missed that story, so fill me in.
He got fined 30% of his purse for showing up late to the pre-bout physical.
Okay, well, that's their right. If he missed the physical and didn't do everything that he was supposed to, they can levy a fine. That's their right.
30%, that's 15 grand.
Well, that's what you get for not following the rules.
Yes, that seems a little heavy-handed. I mean, if he didn't win his first fight, I mean, the fine would have been substantially less because he would have only taken home a few $100.
All I can say is you better follow the rules of whatever athletic commission you're competing for, and if you get fined for not following them, you don't have an excuse.
We have a retirement to announce in the world of mixed martial arts as Shamar Bailey has, after 30 fights, has called it quits.
Yep, and actually, the reason that Tiger Sarnavsky ended up fighting Dakota Cochran was that John Gunderson retired.
it's sad to see. I mean, 30 fights isn't that many, but I mean, sometimes it's like the concussions where it's not the number of concussions, it's the severity of them. I mean, after 30 fights, the wear and tear sometimes on certain fighters is not much, and certain fighters it's everything.
Well, with Brian Stan, he had about a third as many fights, and he retired, and he knew the reason he was retiring was because he had taken the kind of damage he didn't want to take any longer, and it's good now that fighters are actually thinking about that and being aware of concussions and brain injuries, and if they realize things are not going well for them and they choose to step away, that's what we need. We need guys to be thinking about their own health.
Speaking of fighters and their own health, there is no timetable right now for the return of TJ Grant, who hasn't fought now in over 16 months.
Yeah, he's pretty much out of consideration for any kind of title shot at this point.
It's really sad to see that, but you gotta put your health first. That's paramount, right? So
Yeah, and if it's going to be a chronic situation where I don't know the actual intimate details, not that I want to know, but at the same time, if it's in a position where he's like having headaches daily and just not able to function as a fighter, then maybe he needs to look into being a coach and not even consider fighting anymore.
that's basically all the news I have here, except for the fact that Tough Brazil 4 is having their tryouts in a few weeks. They're looking for bantamweights and lightweights, so it's going to be a very entertaining season. I always find it more entertaining with the lighter weight classes. And just hitting the wire now, the UFC Fight Night 54 medical suspension list has come out. And, there's a few fighters here who have been suspended for quite a few days. Nordine Taleb has been suspended for 6 months. Jake Lindsay out for 6 months. Jason Sago out for 6 months. Matt Dwyer out for 6 months. But main eventers, Tarek Safadine, 45 days, and Rory McDonald, only a week.
All I could say with those 6 month suspensions is they're medical suspensions. If you go in and get evaluated by a doctor and the doctor gives the message to the medical report to the commission, then that suspension could always be reduced. It's not like a drug test failure suspension. It's not really the same thing. I honestly wish they would use a word other than suspension to describe it. Because basically what they're saying with a medical suspension is until you get cleared by a doctor, you don't compete with anybody during this time. And if you get cleared by a doctor, then you're okay.
Fair enough. It's interesting to see some of these where it's like 30 days, but then you have 180, you're like, whoa, and then you see why, like, some of them require like a CT scan or an X-ray or, they're just looking out for the fighter's health.
Right, exactly. That's why they're medical suspensions. They're just saying, make sure you're good to fight before you fight again.
All right, well, that's all the news I have on my list. I know we're both looking forward to tonight's kickoff to the NHL season. There's only a couple of games tonight, including Montreal and Toronto, but it's good to have the NHL back. And some people say that's why UFC hasn't been in Toronto and Montreal at the end of the year because, the fights that were supposed to be in Montreal and Toronto, like the Toronto card is supposed to have John Jones, but it is what it is, and some people are saying it's because the NHL schedule is conflicting with Montreal, so they wait till the Habs are out of the playoffs for they have a show there. So
I don't know that was the case, though, when you and I went to UFC 124. Didn't we just happen to have the off weekend in the schedule for the Habs?
That is true. The one-off weekend, Montreal was on the road. I think they were in Toronto that night because I remember we were in the stands and you heard a "Go Leafs Go" chant, and you're like, "But we're in Montreal."
Yeah, I was like, "What the hell?"
So that was interesting, but 200 episodes in the can there, buddy.
Yep, 200 episodes and a lot of fun we've had along the way, including what I just mentioned. We actually went to fights together, so hey, we got to do that again sometime soon here.
I hope so. But what's on tap for AMP on Thursday night?
Well, it's going to be a conversation with Frank Vaughn and I about everything going right and or wrong on WWE Raw, and with time permitting, I may also bonus on the interview that I did with Nick Eugene Dinsmore, but if I don't bonus that onto the show, it's already available as an independent download, so you can go check it out right now on AngryMarks.com and see what the former Eugene has to say about all things WWE and what's next for him.
And don't forget to check out the Face-Off Circle. Myself and Chess Army from SuperFriendsUniverse.com broke down the Western Conference and gave our predictions on not only who wins the West, but who wins the Stanley Cup.
And not only that, but don't forget to check out Undisputed Wrestling from last night, which features Chance Prophet and the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner.
There's some of his stuff that he did in ECW, like his introductions, they still make me laugh to this day.
Oh, they get into that. They talk about how he came up with all those famous limericks.
Alright, well, that's going to do it for the show. For Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. As I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.